Omer Ozkizilcik is a security analyst with the SETA Foundation. Omer joins us now from Ankara. Omer, just very briefly, just lay out for our audience what the mission is of those Turkish troops in northwestern Syria. Why are they there?
So the main reason is to secure civilians and to prevent a new refugee flow towards Turkey and Europe, as the United Nations expects 2 million more refugees going from Idlib to Turkey and the European Union if the Assad regime gets control over all of Idlib. And this would be a massive humanitarian disaster. And the Turkish troops are actively trying to enforce a ceasefire in order to accelerate the political process.
Okay, what do you make of Turkey's response? President Erdogan says about 40 regime positions have been targeted. Is this the first time Turkey has hit the regime's forces?
No, actually, it's not the first time. There were previously other Turkish strikes against Assad regime. For instance, in Idlib, there were other attacks from Assad regime which had retaliation from the Turkish army, and there were also cross-border shelling by the Assad regime which had also retaliation. But here I have to underline that the main aspect here is what is the cost of war and what's the cost of peace for Russia and the Assad regime. At the moment, the Russians and the Assad regime have decided that the costs of war are much lower than the cost of peace for them, because neither Russia nor the Assad regime are really ready to give political concessions and to accelerate the political process. And we know that the Constitutional Committee is still working, but it's not going as fast as it should be. And therefore, they are trying to implement a military solution. They want to solve the issue in Syria by gaining military ground, as they have been done in the recent years. And now what Turkey is doing is to accelerate and increase the cost of a military solution in Syria, and by doing so to force the Russian and regime side to go back to the table.
And does it make any difference to the regime or to Russia that in Idlib there are internationally designated terrorist groups like Hayat Tahrir al-Sham? But, of course, there are also rebels, opposition fighters, whatever you want to call them, who are certainly not terrorists, but are fighting the regime. Does it make any difference to Moscow and to Damascus who they kill?
So we have to say that the Russians always argue that the presence of Hayat al-Sham is their main reason to go after Idlib and to attack these areas. But this does not make sense if we look into the past. The Russians have taken control by military force and the Assad regime over Dera, where no Hayat al-Sham presence was present. They have taken Humus and Ghouta, where a minimal Hayat al-Sham presence or other terrorist presence were present inside these areas. So they see the Syrian opposition as a legitimate target as well. But however, we have to say here clearly that Turkey was hard working on weakening Hayat al-Sham, and Turkey made really big progress. So the radicals inside Hayat al-Sham split, they become weaker, and the Syrian opposition was battling with Hayat al-Sham. But all of a sudden, the Assad regime and Russia increased their military escalation, and a military escalation from the Assad regime and Russia prevents Turkey to act against Hayat al-Sham, because when the cities and civilians are being bombed by Russia and the Assad regime, you cannot tell the civilians to act against Hayat al-Sham. There was massive popular unrest against the Hayat al-Sham governance, and the Russians started to attack and don't allow Turkey to use this opportunity in order to weaken these radical elements. And here I have to remind of a symbolic town, Marat al-Numan. It was the main stronghold of the Syrian opposition, and it was the main stronghold against Hayat al-Sham. And it was the first city the Russians attacked, bombed, and captured.
Omer Ozkizilcik, thank you so much indeed for spending time with us on the News Hour.